Well, thank you for joining us this afternoon. I hope you had a good lunch. And we're very happy to be here and discuss diversity in data. Just to understand a little bit who is in the audience, would you give us a show of hands? Who of you is working in software engineering or is involved in data science?
All right.
Oh, wow. That's about half of it. Thank you. Diversity is a hot topic anyway, no matter where you look at it from. From your personal perspective, diversity has many different facets. What do you think is, or for you personally, which is the most important facet of diversity for you?
Yeah, so firstly, very thrilled to be here and talking to all of you. And Britta, diversity has multiple connotations, as you rightly pointed out. It's ensuring that you are being inclusive in the way that you think about your product design. Many of you are software engineers and data scientists, and so it's critical to ensure that you're designing a product that's actually being built that can service different stereotypes and different types of customers.
Okay. I mean, yeah, if you look at diversity, you have the facets of course, we have gender, we have ethnicities, we have religion, we have different backgrounds. How does it all play? What role did it play in your life? What experience did you have?
Yeah, so Britta, there's some statistic that's out there. Those of you that are wondering, why is diversity and inclusion such a big deal when it comes to product design and software engineering? There are actually proven studies that show that the efficacy of your product and the productivity of your organization goes up, and the metric says 48% if you incorporate gender diversity, and something like 40% if you incorporate diversity along other facets, right, such as ethnicity, nationality, sexual orientation, and things of that nature. So statistics apart, there is actually a lot of merit. There are very good business reasons why you need to incorporate diversity in the way that you do product design.
I mean, you started your career in software engineering, Radhika, a few years ago. What changes did you see with regard to diversity that came about since you started as a software engineer?
I think the biggest, that's a great question, right? Because software engineering itself, as many of you know, especially those that have been around a couple of decades, know that software engineering has evolved dramatically in the last few decades, right? And so, in particular, if you think about constructs like AI and ML and the impact that it has on outcomes in the society in terms of decision making that happens that are being influenced by AI and ML, I think that's probably by far the biggest transformation that has taken place.
Okay. Well, you were just mentioning AI. This is also coming into our everyday lives, and we as people, we face different challenges. I mean, climate change is coming. We have a growing population on the earth that we need to solve how we feed them in the future. We have educational, we have financial divides that are growing bigger. Can you give us a few positive examples where software engineering has helped to increase diversity and the approach and has helped different projects to create a success story?
Yeah, well, I'm actually going to start with the not so great stories, Britta, so that it kind of brings home the point around what success really looks like, right? Many of you may know this, but AI and ML are playing into every aspect of our life, right? These decision-making software is determining, whether your child gets into a specific college, whether you're able to land a job, what kind of advertisements you get when you're shopping online. It determines, the propensity for you to get picked up, the video surveillance cameras, etc., the likelihood of you being identified as somebody that is, a high-risk individual. On and on and on and on, right? Your loan applications, so on and so forth. So there are multiple aspects, multiple facets that are getting determined through the use of AI and ML. And there are countless stories which, again, that have transpired that we should all learn from. Many of you may or may not recall this, but Amazon actually had a job resume filtering application based on AI and ML that would essentially was built off of historical data of successful Amazon employees, which, surprise, surprise, happened to be predominantly male. And so this resume filtering application would categorically look for anything that alluded to a women's college or a women's sport and filter out all those resumes, right? And so now you have this very tricky situation where you're propagating like essentially an all-male environment. Now, luckily, Amazon was able to flag it sufficiently ahead and was able to address some of those biases. But that's just one example of where you can either be operating with a poorly defined algorithm or a poorly defined data set, and you could end up with a system that is actually making incorrect recommendations. Now, one other example that's also at the scary end of the spectrum is where autonomous driving vehicles have been predominantly, especially in frontal crashes, have been designed for the male body, right? And so when these systems when these frontal crashes happen to women or people that are like just have a different genetic disposition or a body disposition, it ends up having untoward developments. And so the point of this is you can actually design a system that is that can lead to undesirable consequences, potentially life-endangering consequences. And so it is critical that AI be applied the right way. Now I'll get to the question that you asked, which is, what is an example of a story that is a success story? We, a part of my employer works, we're headquartered out of Japan. Lots of bullying happening in middle schools in Japan. And so there's actually a AI model that has been built out that can proactively identify bullying behaviors, right? Especially, that are up in social media, and they can nip it in the bud. And so this is, where there were like rise of suicides among middle schoolers. That trend has actually been clamped down because of the way that the AI has been implemented. So some really great stories. I think there's a ton of potential. The key is to ensure the model that you build incorporates that diversity.
That is a wonderful project that you just mentioned. I'd like to go back to the automotive, because I have a history in the automotive business, and I know about the trolley dilemma. So how can we solve this? I mean, there's a lot of software going into the cars, into the autonomous driving cars, and how can we teach the software to make a decision like a human would make it?
Yeah, believe it or not, it turns out that the best way to inject diversity in your models is by not having a homogeneous group design it. So, really it comes down to ensuring that, the group that's doing the product design, the software design, actually mirrors the end customer as well. And it triggers the ability to have discussions that go, what if, or why have we not captured this demographic? And so that is a key first step, Britta, is just making sure that you have diversity in your teams. The second thing I would say is, this notion of explainable AI, right? Not designing systems that are black boxes that, no one can rationalize, right? I think it's critical that be what is referred to as explainable AI, and that in turn results in what people refer to as responsible AI, right? Which is, the right things happen and the right decisions get made.
Talking about right decisions, I think there's also an application for smart farming where AI can support. Can you elaborate on this a little bit?
Oh, yes. There are multiple applications, that come through from AI, and some of these are fairly interesting. I think the one that you're referencing in particular is what we refer to as a better banana. And so, believe it or not, there is banana farming that happens where, you actually have the ability to optimize the environment and, do the right type of water irrigation and so on, leveraging AI techniques. Later today, we're going to be talking about, the opportunity to minimize logging. There's obviously a lot of focus around sustainability, minimizing our carbon footprint, and so on. There are very many environmental applications that benefit from AI, right? And in particular, we're going to be talking about how you can leverage bioacoustics data from the Amazon rainforest, and you can apply AI techniques to it to figure out whether there is the risk of logging that is likely to occur, or if a particular species is to the point of extinction, right? So there's just huge number of applications that straddle all aspects of this.
Yeah. I think it's so important, Radhika, that we have examples like the smart farming or the rainforest to tell to the world and to people who are not in software engineering, who are not working in data science, because I know a lot of people. One of my friends, he loves bananas, but he doesn't like AI. I mean, when he hears AI, it's like Terminator, Doomsday. But if he heard about an application where AI really helps him to get his bananas on the breakfast table, he would have a different look on the possibilities that we have with software engineering. So when we talk about diversity in data, who is responsible for integrating diversity in data? What do you think? I mean, there's so many different groups involved in creating applications. Is it the responsibility of all of them or of a certain group? Is it leadership?
I think it's everybody's responsibility, seriously. I know the regulatory governance around AI is just emerging, right? There are obviously government mandated requirements that are fairly nascent today, and so in the interim, I think it's incumbent on every one of us to ensure that what we're building is truly responsible AI.
Right. I mean, if we look at it from a global point of view, do you see any differences in how diversity in data is implemented on a global scale? Do we have countries that are embracing it more and faster than other countries? What's your view on this?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that Europe is maybe a little bit further ahead than the Americas and Asia Pacific, but in general, the area is still, it's evolving, it's emerging, and I think given the very wide-ranging ramifications and implications of this, regulation is going to be pretty challenging, and I think will continue to be work in progress for the near future.
Right. I was thinking, and I'd be interested in learning your opinion on this, Radhika. Looking at the pandemic, companies have gone to remote work and including employees from different locations. Doesn't this help us also to increase diversity in data because we're employing people that are maybe not local to our place but come from different areas and then have a different vantage point on things?
Yeah, I think those of us in software engineering already know this COVID pandemic has dramatically changed the way that you identify, you onboard, you reskill, and the way that you develop talent. And for sure, Britta, I think that is leading to certain opportunities where the hybrid mode allows us to be able to recruit talent that we would otherwise not have gone after. I think it's a great opportunity really for everybody in software engineering to take advantage of and to ensure that not only that diversity in gender, but also across the other aspects get reflected in the way that teams get built out.
Yeah. So if we imagine that you'd be speaking at Collision next year again, what would you like to be able to report on? What applications would you love to see to come into the market in the next year?
I think it would be great to be able to come back with more success stories, right? And there are, to be fair, there are very many out there. But I think a lot of this comes about from institutionalizing that knowledge, having some structure behind it, having some rigor to it, And then we talked about things like regulation and so on. But I think it's incumbent on the software engineering industry to A, recruit for diversity, and B, ensure that the models and the software and the products that we build reflect and capture that diversity as well. So that's what I think it would be wonderful to be able to get back in here and talk about how some of those metrics have gotten better in the past year.
Right. And speaking about regulation, Radhika, how should we go about this? Does it have to be a government initiative? Can it be a nonprofit organization that drives this? Who would be best suited to drive the regulation in this field?
Yeah, there are a few nonprofit organizations that have started to really get very active in the space. And as with any other topic, I think it's critical to ensure that we embrace and support these nonprofit organizations. Governments can only go so far, and sometimes it tends to be a sledgehammer approach. And so, I would say it needs to be the collective responsibility for all of us in software engineering with those NGOs to ensure the right things happen.
Okay. So as we're wrapping up this session, what kind of advice would you like to give to the audience, or maybe a call to action when it comes to diversity in data? What can everybody contribute to it?
Yeah, so the primary thing I would say is try not to build homogeneous teams. Much of it is easier to onboard those teams and get them ramped up and get them skilled up to the extent that you are actually able to inject diversity upfront. It actually serves you well as you go through the process. The second thing I would say is, be receptive to input that might not allow you to get your product out quickly in the market. It's very tempting, and I say this out of my own experience, to be able to declare success, particularly with AI and ML, with data sciences in general. As we all know, the data set and the models need to be trained and retrained over a period of time. And so while it's easy to claim success, I think it's critical to ensure that the models are getting tested against a fairly heterogeneous set of targets, and therefore you can step back and say, yes, this truly meets the objectives that you intended to achieve in the first place. So, I would just say keep your mind open, and then the third would really be around this concept of, white box AI or explainable AI. Make sure that, if you move on, that somebody is able to step in and understand what has been done there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us on stage. Thank you for attending the session, and keep the diversity in the data. Thank you.
Thank you.